Oh man, I love retro games. I'm just over here having fun, smiling, enjoying myself, and that is absolutely unacceptable behavior. Like, who do I think I am? Just having a good time in this economy? The nerve of me. So you know what? I'm gonna fix that. I'm gonna balance things out. Bring me back down to earth. Maybe even slightly below earth, like basement earth, which is where I already am, to be fair. I'm gonna force myself to play the absolute worst retro games ever made. That'll teach me. That'll wipe this dumb smile right off my face. These retro games are so bad, they're actually kind of fun. Wait. Damn it! Hey there, how's it going? I'm TechDweeb, welcome. Thanks for clicking on the video today. The world of retro games is a wonderful place. We're lucky, if you think about it, to have access to this amazing library of dusty old games that we can enjoy forever. But like all things in life, there is a dark side to retro games. And just like with life, we have to take the bitter with the sweet because the dark times make the good times feel that much brighter. So today, as a bit of a palate cleanser, I'm gonna venture into the darkness. I'm gonna dig up the decaying corpses of the worst games that we hope to never see again. From the classic era of games, everything up to PS1 and Nintendo 64. The garbage games that are nothing more than a black stain on the noble history of gaming itself. I'm gonna play them and see why they're so bad. Maybe have a laugh at them, maybe cry. Probably cry. I can't say what'll happen, but regardless, I'm gonna give them one final chance in the spotlight to disappoint me one last time before I bury them again and spit on the grave. As a final act of disrespect, because these games deserve no less for ruining the lives of children and childish adults everywhere. So take a deep breath, get your barf bag ready, and put your therapist on speed dial because these games are gonna ruin our day in that special kind of way that only terrible retro games can do. It's Christmas morning, early 1980s. You just unwrapped a brand new Atari 2600 game. It's E.T., based on one of the most beloved movies of the year. So you run over to your Atari 2600 console, you plug in the game, you turn it on, you're ready for magic. What you get instead is an exercise in psychological torture. You control a pile of pixels that's supposed to be E.T. He waddles around a bunch of identical screens of just abstract shapes that are supposed to be pits, just a world of pits. Pits are the real star of this game. The main gameplay loop involves falling constantly into pits. Endless pits. You can try to walk around them, but you can't. You can't avoid them. You'll fall into them over and over. And then you'll slowly, painfully levitate out, only to immediately fall back in. Story of my life. Nothing is explained. There are some vague objectives, but good luck figuring them out. You're collecting phone pieces, I guess, maybe. The actual game mechanics almost feel like someone slapped this together in 5 weeks under a tight deadline to have this released in time for Christmas. Almost. And for an entire generation of kids on Christmas morning, this was the moment where excitement turned into deep, soul-crushing, never forget this trauma disappointment. You see this game on the shelf, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde for the NES. The box art looks incredible. Cool, neon, gross, slimy, dramatic monster guy on the cover. I totally fell for it. Little TechDweeb saw this box and thought, oh heck yeah, this is gonna be a cool game. And I traded in other games just to afford it. This was my big summer game. And it was one of, if not the biggest mistakes I've ever made. So in this game, you start as Dr. Jekyll, slowly walking through town like you're late for the most boring appointment in history. That's the game. You walk very slowly while everything around you tries to annoy you to death. There's people walking around. Sometimes they walk past you. Sometimes they walk right up to you and punch you. Sometimes they throw down bombs, just people dropping bombs. And every little thing that pisses you off raises your rage meter. And when that meter fills up, you turn into Mr. Hyde. And it's time for revenge. Which sounds cool, but no, it's not. Now you're forced into this weird, confusing side-scroller world where you move in the opposite direction, fighting off enemies with awkward attacks, trying to survive long enough to turn back. If Hyde goes too far, you lose. You die. No explanation, no clarity. It barely feels connected to the Jekyll part at all. Nothing is intuitive. Nothing's explained. It feels like two broken games stitched together with no instructions. And the worst part is, for me, who spent my own money on this game, it looked like it was going to be amazing. It wasn't just bad. It was betrayal. Now, as someone who didn't have a master system, I had to go to the internet to see what people were saying about this, and the game that showed up basically everywhere that people were talking about the worst master system games was Ace of Aces. This game wants you to believe you're a World War II pilot in a first-person flight simulator game. You're the pilot of a bomber with multiple gunner positions, enemies swarming around you. It sounds like you're about to live out some heroic air combat fantasy, but instead you're aggressively flipping through screens. That's the main game mechanic, switching screens. 1 second you're in the cockpit, and then you panic switch to a side wing view, and then you switch to the other wing, and then switch again, and good luck figuring out what to do on each side of these screens. None of the controls feel like they do anything other than making the mission end early, with you crashing into the ground. I'm sure some of this stuff makes sense once you understand it, but the game is so fundamentally unfun that there is no point in learning how it works. The visuals are super basic, so that the planes just kind of appear as vague pixel blobs in the distance. You're firing in their general direction with barely anything by way of actual gameplay. Nothing feels smooth. Nothing feels intuitive. You're always behind, switching screens, always reacting and switching screens, never in control, just switching screens. It's a cool idea trapped inside a game that feels like it forgot to make itself playable. Pit Fighter on the Game Boy sounds awesome. An underground fighting tournament, gritty vibe, digitized characters like the arcade game that it's based on. But it's supposed to be Pit Fighter. On paper, this should be cool, but then you actually play it, and oh god, the first thing that hits you is how unbelievably slow everything is. Like, look at this. Does this look like people fighting to you? This feels like beyond slow motion, like half speed. On a system that already isn't exactly known for speed, how can it take so long to throw a freaking punch? My god. And the controls suck. They feel stiff and unreliable, like the game is just taking suggestions for what to do when you ask it to do stuff. You'll try to line up attacks, but rarely do they hit, even when it feels like they should. The visuals are muddy and hard to read, especially on the original Game Boy screen. Characters kind of blend into the background, animations are choppy, and it's weirdly difficult to tell what's even happening. Am I holding this guy or is he holding me? Am I jumping or flopping around? I don't know, I can't tell. And it doesn't even matter because even when it's at its best, the game feels sluggish and confusing and just dull. It's not even broken in a funny way. It's just painfully unfun. Arcades can be a dangerous place when a game looks good, because you're not just trying a game. You're feeding it quarters as it mesmerizes you with the flashing lights and colorful graphics. And Time Killers is very good at looking like it deserves those quarters. I remember playing this in a mall arcade that I used to go to when I was a kid, and I did put a lot of quarters in here. I love looking at the big sprites, the weapons, blood, limbs getting chopped off, like this gritty over-the-top fighting game. It felt like big and bombastic to me, so I kept playing it, quarter after quarter. I kept trying to reach the part where the game got good, but no, it does not get good. The problem is that the bones are there. The idea of weapon-based combat with dismemberment is actually really cool. On paper, it sounds awesome, but the actual gameplay is stiff and awkward. Attacks feel slow and clunky, not enough frames of animation, so all the movement feels segmented. Hit detection's messy, so the fights just end up turning into this awkward spacing game where neither side feels great to control. And because it's an arcade game, it is designed to eat your quarters. You lose, but it looked cool, so you continue, and you think that maybe this time it'll click and be fun. But it doesn't ever get fun. This game didn't just kill time, it killed my allowance. I'm not convinced that the developers who made Dark Castle on the Sega Genesis have ever actually played a game, because they didn't make a game. They made something that looks like a game. Even in motion, it does look like a game, and you can technically pick up a controller and push buttons and stuff happens, but it is so far from an actual game, I find it hard to even let it exist in my ROM library aside other actual games. This thing is an exercise in frustration. You're dumped into a castle and you get to pick which door to go through. Each door takes you to a side-scrolling area where your character controls like a cinematic platformer. Oh, and the projectiles are thrown by angling your hand, like as if you're adjusting the trajectory on a cannon, because that's fun to do when deadly bats and rats are trying to touch you, which kills you, obviously. A single pixel of Batwing is enough to end your life because you're the most fragile hero ever, apparently. Each area has a different style to it. Some are like puzzle rooms, some are supposed to be more action-y, some are meant to play like an arcade game, like Donkey Kong in a castle kind of thing. But all of them fail miserably. You will die over and over, and not a single death will feel fair. You will not learn, you will not get better, you will hate every minute of Dark Castle. Race driving on the Super Nintendo is technically a racing game in the same way that a punch in the face is technically a massage. This thing is trying to bring full 3D polygon racing to the Super Nintendo, which is ambitious, and I respect that. I also respect people who can breakdance. However, when you can't breakdance, but you still say, look at me, I'm gonna breakdance, and then you try to breakdance and just flop around on the floor, it's just kind of extra pathetic. The frame rate is the first thing that hits you. It's more like a series of screenshots about a game rather than an actual game in motion. There are times when the frame rate picks up and it almost feels playable, but then some piece of geometry pops into existence in front of you and the frame rate goes down to single digits, low single digits. And the controls suck too, of course. Steering feels stiff and unpredictable, like the car takes your input and then just freaking ignores it. You'll try to line up for a turn and then just drift off the road and crash into a building or whatever at 4 frames a second. The tracks are these weird empty polygon spaces with ramps and loops, which would be fun if you could actually control your car with any precision. And when you inevitably crash, it feels like there was nothing you could have done to prevent it. This game is just exhausting. I'm exhausted just talking about it. So you boot up Sonic Labyrinth on the Game Gear in 1995 and you're expecting Sonic stuff. Speed, fast levels, tight controls, that classic Sonic zip, but instead Sonic walks. Like he's wearing socks on a freshly waxed floor and he's trying to get where he needs to go faster, but he just can't do it. Like that recurring dream that I keep having. The one where I can't walk fast, not the one where my 4th grade teacher is spanking me. There's no running, no building momentum. You slowly drift through these maze-like stages, trying to line yourself up with enemies and bump into them. You do get the spin, and that's mainly how you're going to be moving through the world, even though it feels super inaccurate. And that's also the combat. You sort of just awkwardly collide with the bad guys and hope it counts. You can barely see what's ahead of you, so you're constantly running into hazards or just bouncing off walls that you didn't know were there. The movements are imprecise, the pacing is slow, and the whole game just drags on. Every time you're sort of starting to have fun, some other thing just comes along to piss you off. And the biggest crime that it commits is it doesn't feel like Sonic. It's just this weird floaty maze game with a Sonic sprite. I have to admit that I am not super familiar with the Game Boy Color library. However, it was easy to find a rare level of consensus amongst gamers talking about the worst game on the system. Apparently, Shrek Fairy Tale Freakdown takes the crown. And now that I've played it, I find it very easy to agree. Like, you see this on the shelf and you see Shrek and you see fighting game vibes and you think, oh neat, a Shrek fighting game, that'll be a good goofy time. But no, it's the worst time ever, actually. Everything feels off. The movement is stiff, the attacks are slow, and there's no sense of impact when you hit anything. It's like 2 cardboard cutouts gently bumping into each other. The timing is weird and spacing is awkward, and it never settles into anything resembling a rhythm that you'd expect from a fighting game. It's not broken in an explosive way, it's just annoying and dull and sluggish, which is honestly worse, because at least a broken game can be funny. This one is just a waste of time. Alright, you knew this one was coming. I don't know who decided that the best way to make a Superman game was to turn him into a fog-loving ring collector, but here we are. Superman on the Nintendo 64. This game feels like it should be this big, open superhero experience. You're Superman. You can fly. You got powers. This should be amazing. But instead, you spawn into a city that's completely buried in a thick green fog. Not for atmosphere, not for style. It's just fog everywhere. You can barely see where you're going, which is great because the game immediately asks you to fly through a bunch of floating rings on a time limit. And that's most of the game. It doesn't get any better. You'll be doing this right up until the end. The controls make it worse, of course. Flying feels loose and awkward, like you're steering a balloon that's thinking about other things. Lining up with anything is a struggle, especially when you can't see more than a few rings in front of you. Then you get to the combat and objectives, which somehow feel even more confusing. You'll be picking up cars and putting out fires, dealing with random tasks that aren't clearly explained, all while fighting controls that never cooperate. Never, never. At no point do you feel in control. At no point do you feel like Superman. It's frustrating, repetitive, and utterly joyless. I feel genuinely bad for any kid who got this game. You'd think that a port of a great game, Mortal Kombat, to a system that should easily be able to handle it, that would be a simple thing, right? Mortal Kombat Advance begs to differ. Considering the source material, Mortal Kombat 3, how good that game is, it should have been a slam dunk on the Game Boy Advance. Instead, it feels like everything got scrambled. The controls are the biggest offender. Special moves are inconsistent, like half the time the game just decides that that key combo doesn't do the move it's supposed to do. And in a fighting game, that is catastrophic. And then there's the AI. It's weirdly aggressive and unpredictable, pulling off moves with a level of precision you can't reliably match because your own controls don't frickin' work properly. So the fights turn into this frustrating mess where you're battling both your opponent and the game itself. And you always lose. Visually, it's ugly and sloppy, characters look squished and the pixel art looks all wrong, animations are stiff, missing frames, and everything just feels off compared to what it's trying to replicate. This game probably sold well, simply because it's Mortal Kombat, which is why it's extra sucky that it sucked so much. The PS1 had a massive library, and there's quite a bit of debate online about what game should take the crown as the worst, but the one game that showed up on basically everyone's list, and the one that I can personally vouch for the terribleness, is Bubsy 3D Forbidden Planet. This game feels like it was made by non-gamers who felt like they understood what a 3D platformer is, but clearly didn't. It feels like a prototype of a game that somehow ended up on a store shelf. The first thing you're going to notice is how empty everything is. These huge flat environments with barely anything in them. Like the developers forgot to finish building the world. As someone with intense megalophobia, this game freaks the hell out of me. And the game mechanics are so bad. Even just moving around, Bubsy feels like he's sliding everywhere. The turning is awkward, momentum feels wrong, and lining up jumps is so frustrating. I mean, it's a platformer. Jumping should be the easy part. There's no precision. You're constantly overcorrecting and it just feels awful to play. You just end up praying that the stuff you're trying to do is what your character ends up doing, and most of the time it's not. Enemies and hazards feel randomly placed, like they were just sprinkled in after the fact. Nothing flows, nothing feels intentional. I'm gonna be charitable and give the designers the benefit of the doubt and assume they just didn't finish the game, like it accidentally got released early or something. Because there is no way that anyone intended the game to play like this. And that's it. That's all I have the stomach for today. All the worst games from the classic era of retro games, all that garbage together in one horrible video that you watched for some reason. You must hate yourself as much as I obviously hate myself for playing these games in the first place. We only covered the classic retro systems here too. We didn't even get to Saturn and Dreamcast and GameCube and PS2, PSP and DS. There's so much more we can cover, so let me know if you'd like to do a follow-up video and play some more modern terrible abominations. Because you like to watch me suffer. That's the only reason you'd want that. But if you do want that, let me know in the comments. And actually, I'd love to hear what your personal worst games are on some of these retro systems. Which garbage games haunt your childhood memories? Let's heal together by getting those traumatic experiences off our chests. But for now, I gotta go have a long hot bath with disinfectant and scrub my eyeballs with a pumice stone. And hopefully find a way to wipe these games from my memory. Luckily, I have the perfect tool for that.